The radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 52, recorded on Thursday, October 7th from Milwaukee. This is Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, Jessica Katzenmeyer joins us once more to talk about her historic congressional campaign. But first, the headlines.
The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
First up in headlines, let's update our main story from last week on the Facebook files.
We now learned, thanks to 60 Minutes, that Facebook sucks.
They have confirmed.
They have confirmed that Facebook sucks.
So there was a 60 Minutes interview that was aired on Sunday revealing the identity of the person who leaked the internal documents.
Did you watch it?
I watched clips of the interview.
Okay.
The person responsible for that information leaking, her name is Frances Haugen, and she is a former Facebook project manager and part of the Civic Misinformation Team.
What a team name.
Which was dissolved after the election last year, which prompted her to take those internal documents and leave. She filed a whistleblower complaint with the Security and Exchange Commission. She did share some of the company documents with members of Congress. She testified before Congress this week, and she shared them with the offices of at least 5 attorneys general. She did not provide the documents to the Federal Trade Commission, which has an open antitrust suit against Facebook, because she said she does not believe that antitrust enforcement is the way to solve the company's problems.
Boo.
So we definitely differ on that. Facebook just needs to clean up their ship. I feel like she has the same thoughts in mind as what came out of that Wall Street Journal article.
I'm sure they learned their lesson this time.
Light will disinfect the problems at Facebook.
She's the Susan Collins of Facebook.
So other than that, I mean, not much more information came up about that wasn't already in those series of articles by the Wall Street Journal. But she's the angry mom. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed at Facebook. And speaking of leaked information,
we have a new set of papers to talk about, files to talk about. Well, these are papers. The other ones are files. There is a difference.
In the spirit of the Panama Papers, we have the Pandora Papers, which is the biggest ever leak of offshore data exposing financial secrets of the rich and powerful. It is basically leaked from these major financial institutions and their correspondence with their ultra-wealthy clients in how they're hiding their money from paying taxes.
Quite literally, from the article itself, the more than 330 politicians exposed by the leak were from more than 90 countries and territories. They used entities in secrecy jurisdictions to buy real estate, hold money in trust, own other companies and other assets, sometimes anonymously. This is literally what we talk about when we're talking about dark money.
And these are like the kings and presidents of countries. Vladimir Putin, no surprise, is on here for years. It's been known that he is an ultra billionaire and has been funneling money away from Russia for a long time. A lot of their oil wealth is going directly into his pockets. But also the king of Turkey is on here. I heard the king of Jordan is in here as well. Elton John was named.
Oh, really?
At Shakira.
Of course.
There aren't a lot of names of people from the U.S., but unfortunately, that's because we already have one of the lowest tax burdens on the ultra-wealthy. They don't need to do...
It's just not newsworthy.
illegal things to hide their money. They just don't pay anything in taxes in the U.S. anyway.
Well, I think one thing that this paper also does really well is talking about how the relationship between banks and these very powerful people work so closely together when they're not supposed to. Now, in the United States, good luck with that stuff, right? But like a lot of these other countries with much more regulations in place, that's where a lot of these issues come into play. I mean, you still have places like Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs who are still really getting into a lot of foreign investments and whatnot and just trying to break the rules every chance they can. But even then, The absolute amount of corruption that's going on is just insane.
And there are some U.S. connections because the U.S., especially South Dakota,
Of all states.
is becoming an offshore tax shelter for the rest of the world. The U.S. is listed as second to the Cayman Islands as far as a haven for the wealthy to hide their money.
I'm sure South Dakota, with literally nothing at its disposal, has probably one of the lowest tax rates in the area.
And they passed laws specifically to make it easier and less transparent for these companies to hide their money there. And the idea was like, oh, it would bring all of this economic boon to the state. And of course, no, it didn't, because no one's going there and spending money. They're just hiding their assets there. And you have an office building that houses thousands of corporations in a single office that nobody's actually there. It's not like South Dakota is reaping any benefit. They're just not getting any tax revenue on anything. So it's making a state that has trouble raising taxes, tax revenue the way it is, even worse.
I'm sure its governor would really help out.
Yeah, she's such a bright, brilliant person.
For those of you who don't know, Kristi Noem is the governor of South Dakota, who's been trying to become the next Trump, literally.
She's trying to end CRT and mask mandates. She's not worried about all of the illegal tax money that's being hidden in her state.
Yeah, shocker how the party of law and order really becomes the party of, well, whatever, when it comes to big wealthy people spending money illegally.
Well, it's because the same people benefit from those laws. So none of this is going to change. It's the reason why you can say, yes, Vladimir Putin is stealing money from his country, and his mistress is even on this list because she owns like some shell company that's on here. No one's going to do anything.
No, not at all. Because, well, they just expect it.
And one of the bigger problems here too, as you said, real estate is a big part of this.
Yes.
You have so many large cities that it's impossible to find affordable housing, and yet you've got these ultra condos that are sitting empty. Also, Trump Tower. Trump is definitely part of this. He definitely facilitates this.
No, he's a good man.
That are owned by all of these Eastern European oil magnates, and no one lives in them. So you have these buildings, these billion-dollar buildings that are just tax shelters. It's just an investment, and no one lives there while there are homeless people sleeping on the street out in front of them.
Disgusting.
Best country in the world.
Speaking of the best country in the world, I actually have some good news for you. A U.S. judge recently blocked the enforcement of Texas's controversial new abortion law, having some goodness that we can still hold on to in these dark, dark times.
Temporarily.
Yeah, don't down my parade, man.
Don't yuck your yum.
In a 113-page ruling, U.S. District Court Judge Robert Pittman has blocked enforcement of Texas's controversial new abortion law, granting an emergency request from the Justice Department.
So this is due to the lawsuit filed by Attorney General Merrick Garland,
yes,
against the state of Texas for this law. So this is a direct result of that action.
Again, thank goodness Joe Biden's president.
And we have a quote from Merrick Garland as he called the court's decision a victory for women in Texas and for the rule of law. It is the foremost responsibility of the Department of Justice to defend the Constitution. We will continue to protect constitutional rights against all who would seek to undermine them. Judge Pittman's ruling blocks enforcement of the Texas law on a temporary, unfortunately, basis, and it's unclear how long that ban will be in place.
Well, Texas already said they're going to appeal this to the Fifth Circuit.
And they're seeking a stay on that ruling.
An immediate stay, yes.
Correct. So there's going to be some updates because this is a quickly changing development. As of right now, Texas is not The Handmaid's Tale, and you will be able to get an abortion, but we just don't know for how long.
Hurry, get them quick while it lasts.
Get those embryos out of there.
And just in general, just get out of Texas. I mean, what are you doing there?
And further good news, a rarity for us to have two good stories in a row. We have some updates from the Capitol riot investigation.
Let's have it.
So in a report that was released by the Senate Judiciary Committee today, Thursday, entitled Subverting Justice.
Ooh.
We have the story that Trump directly asked the Justice Department 9 times.
9 times. times
to undermine the election result.
Are you serious?
And his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, broke administration policy by directly pressuring a Justice Department lawyer to investigate claims of election fraud. This is not really anything surprising if you've been paying attention to all these books that have been coming out and everyone's accounts since that day happened.
But now this is officially in public record.
Correct. And I have a note here. Trump should be impeached. Again. Because he really should be. Everything that's coming out in these reports just shows that he has no business in any position of power and needs to go down. Like, this needs to be officially
his legacy.
And it needs to be established that as the American people and the presidency of the United States, this type of behavior will not be tolerated. And making him the first president to be successfully impeached for his actions surrounding the election would go a long way to making that point clear to everyone.
So I hear you, but now what's actually going to happen?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Some people will take the fight. It won't be anyone near the Trump level, though. He'll skate by and there won't be anything. And he'll probably run for president again.
I'm sure Matt Gaetz is starting to rethink his position, right? Same with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Sure.
They're really starting to rethink their positions.
Well,
here.
I think Matt Gaetz has got some other problems, which maybe we'll talk about that next week. But speaking of some fall guys who might take the blame for this, the committee also issued subpoenas on Thursday, targeting two leaders of the Stop the Steal group, Ali Alexander and Nathan Martin.
I have no idea who these people are.
Never heard of them before, but apparently they are the leaders of the Stop the Steal campaign.
Well, screw them. I don't like them.
The committee is requesting records from both individuals as well as Stop the Steal LLC. They actually created an LLC. Alexander has previously claimed that they worked closely with Republican congressmen in planning the rally at the Capitol, including Paul Gosar of Arizona,
of course,
Mo Brooks of Alabama, and Andy Biggs of Arizona.
Oh, of course. Oh, that makes so much sense.
Gosar and Brooks did not comment on the CNN article that we're getting this information from.
I wonder why.
Andy Biggs said that he did not work with Alexander. So I guess we'll see who is right when he is called before the committee for a deposition, which I think is about 2 weeks away. So now can we make it 3 good news stories in a row, Joe?
I'm ready. I'm ready to have it. I'm ready for it. We're going to have a great interview after this. It's going to be amazing. Let me have it. I'm ready.
Let's see. Spin the wheel. What do we got? An inquiry in France finds that over 200,000 children were abused by Catholic priests since 1950. Whammy. Not a good story, but as we talked about many times, the Catholic Church is an organized child abuse ring. QAnon? You're looking for...
Y'all got nothing on the Catholic Church.
You're looking for people systematically abusing and raping children and covering it up? Here you go.
So let's talk about this. The report, which was nearly 2,500 pages in length, said that the vast majority of victims were boys, many of them aged between 10 to 13 years old. It also said the church had not only failed to prevent abuse, but also had failed to report it, at times knowingly putting children in contact with predators.
Just as we constantly hear from the stories in the U.S.
How are people still supporting this organization?
I have no idea.
How? I don't understand it.
As soon as we're done with this, I'm going to go watch the footage from a couple of years ago of Notre Dame burning and then clap and cheer.
I can't even fathom. Every time we keep hearing these stories over and over and over again. Again, it's one thing to be religious. It's one thing to be spiritual. We even talked about this in the last freaking episode.
I defended this.
Right.
Well, but we specifically did not defend the Catholic Church.
Well, and that's exactly my point. You can be religious. You can be a Christian and still be a great person. And I'm okay with it. And we can disagree on that and still come together for the betterment of this country and for the world. Why are you still involved with the Catholic freaking Church at this point? It is unacceptable.
The head of the inquiry said that there were at least 2,900 to 3,200 abusers.
3,200 abusers.
At least, and accused the church of showing a, quote, cruel indifference towards the victims.
And let's also keep note here that this was an inquiry from the perpetrators themselves. So this is what they found. You want to bet that these are actually the largest numbers they could possibly be? I doubt it. You want to bet these numbers are actually a lot bigger than what this report finds? I'd bet you any money on that.
Certainly not everyone who was abused is going to come forward. So,
but this is
200,000. So if you say that's probably double, like at the most conservative, it would probably be double, right? Like half of the people came forward. 400,000 kids just in France.
Well, and I would say we also have to understand here that France is much smaller than the United States and has a much lower population. So the fact that over 200,000 children, again, just from that's like the low ball for this report. It could be much bigger than that.
And just as you would expect, this report showed that even when victims did come forward, they weren't believed because they're accusing a priest. And we put this like literally mystical significance on people who say that they were chosen by God to spread the message to their congregation. So they're in this like literally holy atmosphere. So to accuse a priest, no one believes you.
Oh, it's good to know from this article as well that Pope Francis, quote,
He feels really sad.
he felt pain on hearing about the inquiry's finding from the Vatican statement. He felt pain? That's it? Are you serious?
He's infallible. Talks directly to God, Joe. God did not clue him in that all of this was happening, or any of the other previous popes.
Going further into a Vatican statement, the Pope learned about the report after he met visiting French bishops in the last few days. Quote, his first thoughts are for the victims with a deep sadness for their wounds and gratitude for their courage in coming forward. His thoughts also turned to the church in France, and that in recognizing these terrible events and united by the suffering of the Lord for his most vulnerable children, it can take the path of redemption. I'm sorry?
Again, the belief of the Catholic Church, if you're going to step into their shoes, they believe that these priests were called by God to be in this position to rape and abuse children. God told them to do it.
Or at least God gave them permission to do it.
And put them in that place and gave them the authority to do it. They were called by God. That's what they believe.
This is inexcusable. And the fact that their first reaction is, well, I hope they get their stuff together. I hope they get their ship in order and they can find redemption again. Are you serious? What kind of other organizations that we have that we'd ask redemption for that have over 200,000 abused children?
Facebook?
Damn. Oh, you're right. Oh, I don't like that.
But what they need to do is sell their billions of dollars worth of historical real estate in France and take that money and give it to the victims of this abuse.
I'd agree with that. That is the least they can do. They can do so much more, like dissolving the organization. But they
At this point, they're literally just a child sex ring with religion on top.
I'm so angry. You put it at the end to make me angry right before the interview, and it's going to be a nice interview. Thanks a lot. I'm so angry. Get away from the Catholic Church. They're bad. You can be a good person and go into the Catholic Church. Don't support them. Stop it. You're a better person than the Catholic Church will ever be.
You are paying for child molesters to be shielded from the law and responsibility and put into direct contact with children in other areas that are not aware of their history. That's what you're doing if you're supporting the Catholic Church. You might as well give your money to NAMBLA. That's all it is.
You ruined my mood right before the interview. I hope you're happy for this. Whatever. It's fine. It's not fine. Oh my God, I'm so upset. Oh, fine.
I'm feeling your pain right now.
Oh, you shut up. Don't you Pope Francis me.
I hope that we can find redemption.
Oh my God. Whatever. We'll find it. And you know what we're going to do to screw with the Catholic Church even more? We're going to talk to Wisconsin's first ever transgender candidate for Congress. That's what we're going to do. Screw the Catholic Church. To the interview.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? It's hard to get any word in with this clown.
Last April, Jason and I had on a very special guest, a former candidate for Wisconsin State Assembly, Jessica Katzenmeyer. We had an awesome conversation together, and we learned so much about her story and her historic campaign. Now, she actually is running for United States Congress, making history once again. So we invited her back on because she promised that she'd be with us, and we wanted to talk to her a little bit about her new campaign and actually what's going on with her life and everything like that. So, Jessica Katzenmeyer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
Hey guys, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Our first in studio.
I was saying, and you're in studio with us, so like this is another historic moment. That why not? You're just breaking barriers all over the place.
Hell yeah, we are. I mean, I think last time we were doing this over Zoom, right?
We were.
Yeah.
So let's start a little bit about you announcing for your campaign. You just announced on Monday of this week that you are now running for United States Congress. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So you want to tell us a little bit more about that, why you decided to run for this?
Yeah. So I decided I'm running for United States Congress, Wisconsin District 5. So for those people who do not know where that is.
Good. I was just going to ask.
It is. It is. So if you look at a map of Wisconsin, it's 6 counties, about 1,300 square miles. We got Washington County, Dodge County, Waukesha County, Jefferson County, a little bit part of Walworth County, which is just basically UW-Whitewater, and then parts of western Milwaukee County. So most of it is west, and I would say northwest of Milwaukee. And it's a pretty big area. So the reason why I decided to get into this race, I would say it was back in May, I had a few people kind of approach me about it because Tom Pauswich, who's a great friend of mine, and he ran in this district for 2 terms in a row, was not going to run again. So, of course, we needed to find somebody who would be willing to do it. And I thought about it and I figured, you know what? I can make a huge impact here. I realize it's going to be a tough race. It's going to be a tough district, but I think that I can use my platform and my stage to make a big impact on people's lives. Even if I lose, one of my things I want to do is to inspire other LGBTQ people, especially the people in my own community, the transgender people, that they can do this too, because we need more people stepping up and running for office, especially even at these higher levels.
So now that is currently Scott Fitzgerald's district, correct?
That is correct. Our former state Senate majority leader for, many years, right?
A long time. Really long time.
Too long, let's say.
The architect of many of the problems that we're currently facing with gerrymandering and the restrictions on the power of the governor.
And Robin Voss's former right-hand person there too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and to get a bit more context for people who don't know your district, we are also talking about the same district that we brought out actually before when we were talking about the Waukesha school district issues, who decided to say that school kids were actually getting spoiled because they were having food. This is the same area, correct?
That is the same area. Waukesha is, I guess you could say, one of the big center cities here in this district, if you want to say that. I don't know if it really is or not. But yeah, I mean, that type of stuff does happen in this district.
So this will be a tough road for you, basically.
Yes, it will be, definitely. But we need a good, strong challenger to Scott Fitzgerald to make sure he's put in check. And it's all about democracy because people need a choice in these elections.
Well, then let's kind of start getting down to business then. So you ran mostly on healthcare last time when you were running for state assembly. And I can tell, because I actually have your website out right in front of me right now, that you're running primarily on healthcare again. So I like that idea, but can you want to tell me a little bit more about why you're running on healthcare?
Well, the reason why I'm running on healthcare issues, it goes back to my own personal story. So a couple years ago in 2019, I nearly died from a staph infection after a fire had destroyed the house I was living in here in West Allis. And I fell into a coma. I was in a coma for 3 days. I wake up and I found out I nearly died from the staff there at the hospital, which is a big wake-up call, especially when you're 40 years old, that I definitely needed to do something different with my life. And I spent about a week in the hospital. If I did not have health insurance, which I have through the Affordable Care Act right now, being a self-employed contractor, I would have had to spend $80,000 to save my life. This is one reason why I got into the state assembly race last year, because I believe nobody should ever have to worry about filing for bankruptcy or going into a lot of debt over medical bills. And I believe it's the same thing with this race too. And there's a lot of things that we could do with healthcare at this level.
And I remember you telling me about that story the last time we were on here as well. And that's infuriating to even think about that type of a large number. I actually remember hearing on your launch speech, you did the whole thing where you were asking everyone to raise their hand and seeing if they could afford an $80,000 check to save their life right now. I thought that was a very powerful moment when you were talking to the people of your crowd. I agree with that. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous the fact that we still have all these issues with healthcare as a completely well-developed nation. As a world leader, we are having all these struggles with healthcare. Where we have other countries like Canada, UK, who actually have nationalized healthcare systems, we have nothing compared to that. And, I'm not going to try to get you on the whole debate about whether or not you're actually for like the Medicare for all thing, or if you're trying to expand the Affordable Care Act or whatever. I'm not going to get into that garbage because that's like a whole Democratic mess right now. But we need to expand healthcare in some way, shape, or form. Would you agree? Or
Yes, I definitely completely agree. And this is definitely a part of my platform is I do believe that we need to expand healthcare coverage, make sure that it stays affordable and even gets more affordable for people. Because, even if the Affordable Care Act becomes too expensive where people, the average say, hey, I'm working one part-time job to make ends meet or two part-time jobs person can't afford it, then that's an issue. And a lot of these people, they have kids, maybe they're a single mom and they got two kids and they gotta put food on the table for the whole family and they gotta put a roof over their head. And this is why this is an important issue for me. I can even think of, I know a person who really touched my race last year. It really inspired me last year. Her name is Kylie. She lived in my district and she just turned 18 last year right before the election. And she said she voted for me and I was one of the first people that she voted for because she knew I would protect her healthcare coverage. And she has a heart condition where she really needs those necessary prescription drugs to save her life every single day. So this is why this issue really speaks to me. And I think that it affects everybody. It's not just a partisan issue. It affects everybody.
So one of the big fights that's going on right now between, I would say, the president and every moderate and progressive Democrat.
I was going to say probably like everyone versus Kirsten Sinema.
Well, and Joe Manchin is still on the other side of this.
Okay, I'll give you that.
So other than the very corporate backed by a big pharma lobby are pushing for the Build Back Better bill, which includes an expansion of Medicare coverage for dental and hearing, as well as letting Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices. What would you say? What side would you be on in that discussion?
Thank you for that question. That's a very good question. I think that, yes, definitely I would be for that. I can't tell you how many times I go to the pharmacy and it seems like my prescription drugs that I need just keeps going up and up and up. And even though it may be a few dollars each time, it's getting to be ridiculous. And especially for basic little things like asthma inhalers, because I have asthma, those are medications I need. And if they're not affordable, I can't get them, including anybody else. So it's important for us to have some sort of control over this because it's really getting out of hand.
What's the other thing for allergies? The EpiPens are kind of out of control right now as well.
Yeah, as of right now, the average cost of an EpiPen of what somebody needs when they get a bee sting is almost $700. And these have an expiration date on it. So even if you don't use it at all, you just lost that much money just to have a medication you need on you at all times in case you do get stung by a bee.
Well, and that's insane too, because I think in the UK, you're averaging around like $20 for an EpiPen. So it's like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, like why is it $20 in the UK or who knows what the cost of it is in Canada? And here we are, we're spending like $670 here in the US. It's completely ridiculous. And here, I have another perfect example for you guys. So when I got out of the hospital, I was prescribed an inhaler, a twice a day inhaler to control my asthma. It's about, if you take your index finger and your thumb, you spread it out, it's about that big.
Okay. And
it's something to control your asthma. It retails for $425 a month. I own a Toyota Sienna minivan. And thankfully, I've made all the car payments. Now it's completely mine. But when I was making the car payments, it was $415 a month. So you're telling me this little three-hole inhaler, who knows what the cost is to produce it, is much, much more than a month than even my car? It's ridiculous.
I totally agree.
And that's the reason why the price is so much better in other countries, is because it's regulated by the government.
Right. They get actually a chance to negotiate prices down because you have a much bigger market to stand for.
But I was going to say, too, the problem is when they try to negotiate the prices down, the pharmaceutical companies are going to lobby hard against it because they know they're making all the money off of these prescription drugs.
Well, and they still do in the UK and Canada as well, but they just don't have nearly the amount of power as they do here.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's what their government is doing to help protect their citizens, is regulating those prices, and it can only be a certain limit to prescription drug costs. Whereas here we don't have that because we have such a strong lobbying group with the pharmaceutical industry.
And especially with these prescription drugs that are needed by people, like for everyday use to keep them running smoothly, I mean,
When they say the cost of living,
No kidding. So then let's actually segue from like these large super companies to another point of your platform, which is supporting small businesses, kind of almost the exact opposite of these large corporations. So I think the big thing I want to ask you right now is, why do you want to support specifically small businesses, and what is that going to do for us in the long term?
Small businesses are important to me because I live in West Dallas. And for anybody who's ever been to West Dallas, it is a very rich small business community. When you walk through, for example, where I live, downtown West Dallas, what do you see? You look left and right, you see little mom and pop shops. There's like a sewing machine repair shop right down the street from me. There's a CD place. There's a liquor store across the street. All of these are mom and pop shops, including restaurants and bars. And one of the things I've seen throughout this pandemic, as we're getting close to, I guess, the 2-year anniversary of this, is these have been hit hard. And many of them have even closed, and who knows if they'll even come back again because of the effects the pandemic has had. So that's why I want to have supporting small businesses on my platform, to have something to do for them, to make sure that we promote the community as well as the district, and see if there's something that we could do at the federal level to support these small businesses. I was also going to say too, back in April, I think it was pretty soon after I was on the show with you guys, that I was appointed to the Plan Commission for a 3-year term by the mayor of West Dallas.
Oh, okay.
And I've learned the importance of supporting small businesses through being on the Plan Commission and serving on that, because I see all the plans come in for these businesses, and it's our job to look through everything, make sure everything looks good. We talk to the owners if the owners come into our meetings, and we approve those, and then it goes before the Common Council. And it's really cool when we approve something and then you see it being built, and then they open, they're like, hey, I worked on that project. That's pretty cool. And I see how important that the small businesses are to our economy and to our small towns here, suburbs, or other small towns out here in the district.
and right now, getting back to the healthcare point, small businesses are more impacted by the rising healthcare costs than large corporations because they don't have that same negotiating power that the larger companies have.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it crazy how all these issues are all so interconnected with each other?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, and that's where I wish people would understand when it at least came to healthcare. I guess we're going right back to that. But you're 100% right, though, Jason, where I always try to tell people, like, actual expanding healthcare coverage is one of the most pro-business things that you could ever imagine doing, because it's helping out the small businesses who can't afford to provide benefits, and always substantial benefits, for their workers, who compared to like big corporations like Walmart and others who can just kind of get whatever plans they want because they can afford it. Where you have like typical mom and pop shops who have like 8 to 15 employees, they don't have any type of means to get these types of coverage for them.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. If we could have the government help expanding healthcare coverage and making it more and more affordable, then that's actually reducing the costs for these small businesses. And you could even say the major companies as well too.
So you said that small businesses are currently struggling, which that's a very accurate statement right now. And one of the biggest struggles that a lot of these businesses have are finding workers. So we are still dealing with some kind of labor shortage right now. I mean, whether we want to talk about it or not, like that's what's happening. And Dems kind of get squishy on it because Republicans use it as like a dishonest talking point. But there is still a labor shortage that we should be addressing here. So how do you feel about the labor shortage right now from the pandemic, where we're still recovering from this kind of lapse in the economy?
Well, I think that this has brought up a whole new issue to light with the labor shortage. When you drive around a city like Milwaukee or a lot of these other small towns and Congressional District 5 here in Wisconsin, you see a lot of businesses offering like $1,000, $2,000 sign-on bonuses. Okay, that's great. But then the real question is, what are you paying your employees for an hourly wage? And I think that this is the real issue here, that companies are not paying their employees enough. And that's why they don't want to go back to work for, like, say, let's say whatever restaurant it might be, or whether it's like Taco Bell or whatever business or company or production company, or whatever it might be, because to them, they feel like, okay, it's not worth it.
I mean, we're also seeing it right now, too, where restaurants who are still paying workers garbage wages, I'm talking like $8, $9 an hour, which is not affordable.
Well, for a server, it's more like $4.
Well, sure, but I'm trying to
a tipped employee.
Right, I'm trying to even avoid that because that's a whole
Well, and in the pandemic, you have less customers coming in, so that tipped wage is even less attractive.
Exactly.
Right now.
But what's happening right now is a lot of these places are also losing employees to, we'll say, more retail style businesses that can afford it. So, like example, we talked about the idea of big box stores before. They're the ones who are actually starting to pay higher wages because they can afford to right now, where small businesses can't. So what the heck do we do about that while trying to motivate people to stay with their small businesses while still giving them some kind of competitive edge over companies that are way bigger than they are?
I think that's something I definitely have to do some more research into, see what we could do to help the small businesses who do not have this edge as like a bigger company, like say like a Target has, in terms of being able to pay their employees more. Maybe we can look into something like a grant system, or those are just ideas that are kind of popping up in my head right now to support them for, like, say, okay, if you're going to raise your wage to say at least $15 an hour, we'll give you a certain grant to help you cover those costs. So to get you up and moving again.
And I think when the government does dole out these programs, and we saw with the PPP money,
you are reading my mind right now.
And it was mostly going to the banks, who were then choosing to only grant them to their larger customers, which is better for their business. And that was an issue. It should be something that's targeted directly at those small businesses that could really use that money more than, say, Robin Voss's popcorn company.
Well, right. Right, exactly. And I mean, we talked about Steve Mnuchin back when Trump was still president as the head of the Treasury, where they're talking about these things, or these PPP loans were basically a big slush fund for him just to dole out however he pleased. And there was absolutely no regulation and guidance for him to actually have it go to small businesses, which was infuriating. So I'd even give you a suggestion as well. Let's close these freaking loopholes, because that's absolutely ridiculous that we have money going to small businesses when the government's actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And you have these greedy, wealthy people who are actually taking it from these well-deserving small businesses who are struggling right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I completely agree with that, because that's kind of the downside, with giving out money, but then there's no regulations with it. We need to make sure that there are these regulations in place to make sure the businesses are using the money for what it's actually supposed to be used for, instead of say, hey, I am owner of this business, and hey, I'm going to go to this expensive golf club every single day and play golf. I mean, for real. And while, somebody's making sandwiches at $8 an hour at Jimmy John's, for example. Sure. So I think that there definitely needs to be like some accountability measure. Okay, give us proof that you're actually increasing your wages for your employees.
I would say a lot of it goes also into tax reform, where a lot of these big businesses are also not paying what they should be in taxes, partly due to the Trump corporate tax cuts, and then partly just due to the complicated tax code, where if you're a large, wealthy business, you can afford a huge accounting department that can get around a lot of those loopholes. And we see it all the time. Amazon, they don't pay any taxes.
Well, we literally just discussed it right now before this with the Pandora Papers.
I was going to say, yes, I agree. I think that the big corporations like Amazon, like Walmart, Boeing, I mean, whatever company, comes up to your head, I think they do need to pay their fair share of taxes and keep that burden off of these smaller businesses. And that's maybe another accountability thing that we can put in place. Like say, hey, if you show us that you're actually giving your employees a fair wage, that you're actually using our money for what you say you're going to do, we'll give you a bit of a tax break.
Well, and I would even argue that we should also be using this tax money for other programs and things that are not even just business related too. So like, for example, you have as like your last two big things on your platform, which are sustainable infrastructure and clean energy and supporting our schools, which I 100% agree with, obviously. So I want to talk about, at least first, let's talk about the clean energy plans and what your thoughts are about how we can build a better infrastructure for America's future right now because it's freaking bad.
And that is something that again ties back to the Build Better plan, where all of the climate change and renewable energy, clean energy programs are tied to that plan, which is currently in limbo.
Basically, Joe Biden's amazing. Which, oh my God, Jason, I cannot believe it. Can you believe the fact that we would actually even be saying that we'd be praising Joe Biden at this point?
I'll praise him when it passes.
Well, okay, I'll do that.
So, okay, talk about infrastructure. How many times have you guys or anybody listened to this ran over a pothole in Wisconsin today? I mean, for real. I mean, if I got $1 for every time I ran over a pothole.
You drove down Forest Homecoming here, right?
You know.
You'd actually be able to fix your suspension after hitting all those potholes.
Well, yeah, and I might be able to retire too on top of that. So, but yeah, I mean, sustainable infrastructure and clean energy is really important. I mentioned this last Monday during my speech about global warming and how that's really affected us here. Especially, I think it's been more noticeable this past year with stronger hurricanes hitting the Gulf Coast and the East Coast, as well as the wildfires out west, places like cities like Seattle that usually sees a temperate climate that maybe gets no more than 80, 85 degrees in the summer, had several days this past summer of over 100 degrees.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, and people actually died because of that because they're not used to that type of weather. And I'm thinking that because we didn't take global warming seriously 20, 30 years ago, this is going to be a continued trend until we take care of this issue.
We're still not taking it seriously.
Yeah, and it just blows my mind why people don't care about it, and it is a real issue. I also want to say, too, with clean energy, I'll use an example. Even in our district, at the 5th Congressional District, we're seeing some examples of this already. So if you travel up 41 up to Allenton and then go west of Allenton, there's the Butler Ridge wind field, the turbine field up there that creates enough power for 20,000 homes.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I think that that's something that, I mean, I know there's other wind turbine fields across the state, but I believe that that's the only one currently in the district. And that's something that we could definitely invest more in. And when you invest more into clean energy, I do believe that it also helps to create more jobs too. And the other thing I want to touch on with this is broadband access. So this district is 1,300 square miles. About 85% of it is rural. So there's very different issues when it comes to rural issues and urban issues. And urban meaning most of the western suburbs are in this district of Milwaukee.
Sure, the more metropolitan areas.
Right, correct. And so I've been out to places like Waterloo, which is kind of on the far western edge of the district. That's about 10 miles north of I-94. And you'll be surrounded by like a few like downtownish buildings, if you know what I'm talking about, you know, like a few businesses. And then I looked at my cell phone and I only had one bar on my cell phone. And you would think, okay, I'm in this little downtown area. Maybe I should have more bars, but it's kind of ridiculous. I do think that broadband and having access to broadband is a right for everybody, no matter if you live in a rural area or not.
Especially in this day and age where a lot of people are still working from home during the pandemic, having that ability to have the broadband and you can work from home, your kids can learn remotely. It's a big disconnect between people that live in the city versus people that live in rural areas.
I'm also going to out myself either as a proud Wisconsinite or as an alcoholic. And you said that you were in Waterloo and you only had one bar. I thought you meant that you had one like literal bar on the strip of Waterloo to go to drink at. And I'm like, no, there's got to be more bars in Waterloo than just one. I mean, come on. I know Waterloo's small. They have more bars to drink at.
They have more than one corner, so there has to be.
Yeah, they have
they have more bars to drink at than you actually get for your cell phone reception.
Yeah, I'll make that clear. I'm talking about my cell phone reception and the little bars here in the upper left-hand corner of your phone, right?
Well, and I'm just kind of looking at your website right now. So yeah, and you just mentioned it as well. When you're talking about clean energy, you're talking about making millions of jobs happen for Americans across the country right now. When you're actually investing in these programs. And we've talked about this on our show as well, too. And that's actually part, again, wow, okay, this is like a subliminal message for Joe Biden support, I guess, but also part of the Build Back Better plan, where you're actually investing in infrastructure that has sustainable energy projects that will actually create more millions and millions of clean jobs across the country. So either A, you took that from Joe Biden, or B, you're just a very, very smart person. Or C, I guess it could be both.
I think I'm going to go with C on this one.
right,
I mean, I like that C idea because I am a pretty smart person. And yes, definitely Joe Biden on that. Because, when you're building the infrastructure, somebody's got to build it too, right? That gives jobs to our construction workers and our carpenters and electricians. You could use that for union working jobs too. I mean, whatever it might be.
Well, especially when you have a lot of manufacturing jobs that are now just becoming obsolete, this would be a good way to actually get a lot of those blue collar jobs back into the workforce again, because it's just a lot of these areas, especially in the rural areas, are just, they don't have enough to work off of. So like these types of green initiatives would be amazing to have jobs come into those communities and actually have people working over there.
Yes, definitely. I agree. And it gives people a place to work at out in the rural areas. And I'm going to add on the importance of clean water too. Who doesn't want to have clean water, right? I mean, we have to use it for cooking. We have to use it for drinking. And when you get out of these rural areas, when you have the septic systems or whatever else is used, it's such an important issue that we need to continue to make sure that everybody in the district has clean drinking water and clean water to use for their everyday purposes.
Well, and even right now, you have Wisconsin Dems talking about PFAS right now. What that's supposed to stand for, I have no freaking idea. I can't remember. It's like a super long chemical name. But basically, it's the idea that these are chemicals and toxic chemicals and hazardous chemicals from either manufacturing plants or just general like byproducts of other things that are now seeping into our groundwater. And because of that, it's actually making at least in Milwaukee area, but I mean all throughout the state, just the idea of our drinking water just going down the tube because of these PFAS. And actually, I didn't actually watch the episode, but John Oliver just did a segment and caught up to Wisconsin Dems apparently and started talking about PFAS as well. So what are your thoughts about stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely the agricultural runoff is a big issue, and I think that we need to work with our farmers to build, I guess maybe not necessarily build, but move toward a more sustainable agricultural practices. Because when if there's chemicals that they use for their crops, or whatever else that they may use them for, it runs off the farm and it gets into our groundwater supply, and then that gets into our drinking water supply. So guess what you're drinking? I mean,
and then even in the waterways, personally, my hobby is fishing, and fertilizer runoff causing algae blooms in lakes is a big issue as well.
Exactly.
And then let's finish this off with talking about education. This is kind of one of my biggest pet peeves because, God, uneducated people are killing us right now.
You have a history in education, don't you, Joe?
Oh.
That's something that we don't talk about a lot.
So, but you talked about supporting public schools on your website and actually really bringing more funding to schools to make schools more affordable. Now, and you also have, if I'm not mistaken, making public, like K through 12 schools more affordable, but also making public college more affordable as well. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, what is the average cost for a student to go to, say, UW Milwaukee?
A lot. It's a lot.
4 years. And we're talking about in-state students, too. Whereas back when I was in school, back in the late 90s and the early 2000s.
Don't date yourself too hard right now.
I mean, it was actually still somewhat affordable. I think, I lived at home, so I didn't have room and board. But for my class load, I think I paid, don't quote me on this, about $4,000 a semester for a full class load. And that's like 15 credits worth of classes. So that, to me, is like still somewhat affordable. Now, a wonderful lady who was on my team last year, her name is Bailey. She just graduated UW Milwaukee, and she was telling me it was going to cost her about $70,000 for 4 years.
Oh my God.
It's insane. And, education is important to me, and it should be important to all of us because this is our future. This is our future leaders, our future business owners, our future future workers. So I've always said an investment in our education is an investment in our future. We need to make sure our teachers are properly paid. We need to make sure that more funding is going to all the states in the country so that they can properly fund their public school systems. Like, for example, why is it that you go to, say, a high school 5 miles down the road and the quality of education is so much different than than, say, a high school where I live in West Dallas is.
No, I totally agree. And that's something that we really see right now with the segregated areas of Milwaukee County, where you have like very wealthy suburban schools that are just completely outperforming schools that are about 10 minutes away from them. And that's unacceptable.
And that's due to the disparity in property tax revenue.
Literally.
And the number of schools, like the density of the population as well.
Literally. And it all goes back to just generations of systemic issues. I mean, we can even talk about going back to things like redlining, where you literally had people just meant to go into these impoverished areas, and we just literally sectioned off black people in this entire county. But all of that comes down to just perpetuating systemic injustices and inequalities that we have to fix.
It's really sad to see all this disparity here in Milwaukee, whether it's segregation and education, because you would think that supporting the public schools, whether it's in Milwaukee or in the surrounding suburbs, is so important, because I believe that education is a cure for poverty. Because when people get educated, they go to college, get more education, and they'll find better jobs, and then they can better support themselves and their families. That's why it is so important. And even as a person that doesn't have any kids, I still stay involved in school board meetings for both, especially here in this local area, West Dallas, West Milwaukee, and New Berlin, because to me, it's important knowing that these are our future leaders.
And definitely the issue with the cost of school being so high these days goes back to what we were talking about with the minimum wage.
I thought you were going to talk about healthcare again. I'm like, oh, man.
Where you always have these Republican lawmakers that talk about how they put themselves through school with their minimum wage job.
Well, they worked really hard.
You look at the numbers, and the minimum wage was only slightly lower than it is now, but the cost of their school was 20 times less.
So I think the way that the Republicans look at it is, okay, you could take any building. It could be this building we're in right now. It could be a school, no matter how new it is or how old it is or how much it's about to just completely fall down to the ground. But the problem with that thinking is, if you cut the funding and you're not paying your teachers enough, who's going to want to teach? So then you're not getting good quality teachers for these kids too.
Which Wisconsin's also dealing with right now. Still.
Right. Still, I mean, don't even get me started with Act 10.
Right. Mm-hmm. And again, now we were having those issues before the pandemic hit. It's got even worse since then.
Right. And it's amazing with all these battles going on in school boards across the state, with especially with simple things like being mandated to wear a mask at the school and just protecting other workers from the COVID pandemic.
Now, I am looking at your website, and you're supporting school as part of your platform. I am kind of shocked to see that there is a complete absence of banning CRT and critical race theory in schools. So I heard that was a really big deal from lots of Republicans. I'm just surprised that you just don't have this in your plan.
Are you trying to teach white kids that they're worse than the black kids?
Okay, first off, let's get one thing straight, especially in the West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District, as well as, I guess we can include the New Berlin School District too. So CRT is not even taught in these schools. Yeah, people.
No way.
Yeah, right? Like, oh my God, like maybe if you actually did some research, looking into the real issues, looking at real websites instead of believing whatever you believe on Facebook, you'll actually find that CRT is not taught in these schools. So it is amazing going to West Dallas, West Milwaukee school board meetings, and we'll get like these QAnon people coming in testifying each week, say, don't teach CRT to our children. So what's the point of saying don't teach CRT to our children when it's not even being taught in the first place?
Well, it's because they don't even know what it stands for. It's ridiculous.
And it goes back to the misinformation going on.
And racism.
Exactly.
And fear-mongering by right-wing
Fox
media
News.
outlets.
Yeah, literally.
Well, that's a huge problem because I think a lot of these people, these anti-mask parents and anti-vax people, they're going to go to whatever website that's going to tell them the answer that they want to hear. And then that's what they believe. Or they'll believe what their other conservative friends say on Facebook.
Well, let's talk about that. I know I'm kind of going all the way back to your campaign now, but you are in a pretty red district, and you're going to have a lot of these issues. I mean, because we've talked about and joked about the Waukesha County Republican Party, about how they're like the craziest party we have right now in this state. And you're going to have a lot of these types of supporters coming out after you because of this.
And they're probably my neighbors. So you can wave to them when you leave.
Yeah, they're them and their Confederate flags. But I want to know what you think we should do to try to deal with these types of people and try to actually win these people over and persuade them? Like, what do we even do?
Well, I think first off, you just have to be very careful about messaging and how we message these issues to people, if we message them at all. I think that's where it starts with, because there's definitely certain, if you want to say, trigger words that you can't use when you're talking to people at the door. Definitely there's certain issues that I'm probably going to stay away from, depending on where I am when I'm doing doors in this district. And that might be the mask issue. But as a leader, it is our responsibility to look after everybody. So the reason why you want to mandate masks in schools is it's not just for the children. You got to think of the teachers and the staff and
Everybody.
to the guy that's sweeping the floor.
Yeah.
I mean, if one person gets sick, then it's going to spread like rapid fire. I mean, look what happened in Waukesha. There was a student that died there from COVID. And then now finally they passed a mask mandate, which to me, it's sad that it takes that to pass a mask mandate when we could prevent it in the first place. And that's what we're talking about here. And the only problem is that, you can say science, till they're blue in the face, but some people will just not believe you.
Well, they'll have, unfortunately, with the internet, they're going to find one person that's a doctor we have in our own state, Pierre Corey, who is an actual medical doctor that does not believe in science. And they'll cite that one person and say, well, see, this refutes the hundreds of thousands or millions of doctors who disagree with him, but I found one that says what I want to hear.
Well, and you and I have found out, so I'm a part of various local town hall groups on Facebook, and they're full of crazy right-wing conspiracy theorists because, it's Wisconsin and it's Facebook. But what I've seen is a lot of advertising from these people about this one guy who's doing talks around the state about critical race theory. And I kid you not, it's a professor from UW Oshkosh. And I quickly had a look. So what is he doing? He's talking about critical race theory. He's talking about why it's horrible for your kids. He's talking about why you should be actually taking your kids out of public schools and putting them into homeschool environments because you can't trust teachers for what they're doing. And do you want to know what he is? He's a legitimate professor at UW Oshkosh still right now. Do you know what he does or what his PhD is in?
What's that? I'm intrigued to know.
I'm going to say economics.
Shakespearean literature. And he is just touted as this expert on critical race theory. And I've tried talking to these people about it, even though saying, hey, this is probably not your guy that you want to talk to because, he's a Shakespearean literature expert who's talking about something that's done in legal and social psychology circles. But forgive me for not accepting that your expert's a legitimate source. But even then, that doesn't matter because like you said, Jason, it's all about finding sources that actually confirm what you already believe. So, and that's why I don't know what to do with.
Now, maybe if he was talking about Hamlet, I might actually believe him. Or if he starts quoting Hamlet, like to be or not to be. Or
you actually didn't know, but Romeo and Juliet was actually a whole theme about systemic related issues around race and racism. You just didn't catch that in the
Capulets and Montague,
right?
Just a analogy.
The Capulets actually represented white supremacy. You didn't know it. If you were super awesome like me and just know
I think that was the '90s version with Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, I mean, I think having success in your messaging is fighting the issues that speaks to everybody. So maybe it may not be education when it comes to, say, I'm talking to somebody who's a leaning conservative or, a diehard Trump supporter, but maybe talking about something instead like healthcare. Is healthcare, again, as we go back to healthcare, that speaks to everybody in my mind. And I think this is how we are going to win over lean Republicans in this race is talk about things that really speak to them and talk about how I will actually listen to you and help you out. And actually just showing up at their door might mean a lot because, do we see Fitzgerald out anywhere besides...
Have they had that happen before in the
Yeah. You might see him at the Brookfield 4th of July parade walking down the street like a robot, but other than that, when do you actually see him? Does he hold town halls? Because that's something that I want to change is being more visible out in the district. And honestly, I think that people would appreciate that. Even the leaning Republicans who don't like him, but maybe, hey, I'll give her a chance if she's going to actually talk to me and answer my emails or my phone calls, right?
Nice. But then I will say, I mean, we're kind of running out on time, so we'll start wrapping this up. I don't want to just make this only about politics. I want to actually kind of ask you a couple of things as well. Just, you're doing a lot right now. Obviously, you're still working on top of this. So, and this, this being such a big campaign, I mean, I can't even imagine how stressful this would actually be on a candidate. So what are you even doing to kind of keep yourself sane throughout this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because you got to remember we're humans too, as candidates. And so I have my own place in West Dallas all to myself. So I have to still support myself. I still have to pay my bills. I still have to pay all of my insurance stuff. So I still have to work full time too. And I think just finding like self-care time, like even if it's like a half hour to watch a show on Netflix or just to close myself off in my bedroom off from the rest of the world, doing something like that definitely helps keep me insane. And a couple other things I've been working on for my own self outside of the campaign as I've lost a lot of weight. I've lost 70 pounds now in 2 years.
Oh, nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank you. And that's definitely hard as anybody who's ever been working on a campaign or been a candidate before, they know that when you're on the go like that, it's so easy to say, hey, let's go to like Culver's and run through the fast food drive-through.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
I may end up doing that.
You're making me hungry right now.
I may or may not have accidentally skipped dinner and have to go get McDonald's after this.
and that's the thing. Like, okay, maybe if we have to grab a quick dinner, we can think of better choices we can make. Like, okay, instead
Don't you
of
guilt me before I do this.
I know where there's a Culver's, Joe. It's right.
maybe instead of getting that juicy double cheeseburger, with all the extra toppings and bacon or whatever,
Stop
maybe get a grilled chicken
hungry.
sandwich. And then the other thing that I've been doing as part of my self-care is I have been taking voice lessons right now because I do love singing, and it's a way for me to naturally like release my emotions of the craziness of our days as a candidate.
Well, that's really cool. And I remember you were talking about like the theater group before too. So yeah, that totally makes sense to me. How long have you been doing the voice lesson?
3 weeks now. I have
Nice.
to think about that.
Nice. All right, and then to finish it off, what are you watching on Netflix? What are you binging right now? You said you're watching something to keep your mind off of things.
I absolutely love the show Veep. I mean, I'm a political nerd too, so I like stuff like that that's politically related. So it's kind of funny to watch a political show to keep my mind off of politics, although maybe that may not make any sense at all.
I get it. I was a West Wing fan. I understand that, so I totally understand. But Jessica Katzenmeyer, thank you so much for joining us. We really did appreciate it. If anyone were to find you, where would they go?
Yes, thank you again for having me on again, guys. I had a lot of fun again today, and I could definitely use all your support out there, whoever's listening. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as you're in the U.S., if you're over 18 years old, we could definitely use donations. You could definitely go to my website, which is www.jessica4wis.com, and then our Facebook page is my first name, Jessica, my last name, Katzenmeyer, on Facebook, and you'll find out any campaign information or any ways on how you can help me succeed if you like my message today.
And seriously, everyone who's listening to this, go donate to this campaign. It's so amazing to see actual people making history in this state and doing really good things for the community people. I'm so sick of just nonsense politicians in general and making it so like everyone just hates politics. It's good to see an actual community member getting involved and doing something about it. So please go to our website, go donate whatever you have because man, she needs it. So please go do it. Other than that, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's been fun as always.
Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively. Let me try again. Let me just try that all again. I didn't like any of that. Let me try again.
The committee also issued a peanut. The committee also a penis.
Anyway, sorry I interrupted you.
No, wait, what were we talking about?
That's why I said I'm sorry.
And that's our podcast.
And that's all right.
That's all, folks.